Okay, guys, important stuff to talk about today. Most importantly, being this fuel pump assembly gizmo. So after putting the engine in the boat and doing our little, our little float test that we did, engine had to come back out for a couple of reasons. For the last time, it needs kind of like final prep done to it, but I was almost going to gamble with this pump assembly for the time being, but I decided not to. With the engine out and being on a stand for the last time, hopefully, I decided to address the issue with these things. So I've talked about this thing in previous videos. It's a Volvo Penta fuel module. It was used on 5 liter, 5.7, I think even all the way up to like the 8.1s and stuff, whatever Volvo Penta was using at the time in the late 90s into the early 2000s or whatever. But your fuel pump has to be within like 12 inches of the engine in order to be Coast Guard legal. So you can't have a pump like in the other end of the boat in the fuel tank with EFI. So there's a few things that you can do, but this system works pretty well. It has two pumps. Here's your low pressure and there's your high pressure. This just sucks from the tank and fills up a well up in here, and then this thing draws off of the well and ramps it up to the 60 psi that's needed to make these things run. So the problem with these, they developed them like I said, I don't know, 98, 99 or something like that, started using them. It was immediately afterwards when we started putting ethanol in fuel. And, there's a lot of people that don't want to pay for recreational fuel. So they would just put, fuel from the gas station in it. And the coating that they put on these, I don't know if you guys remember seeing this in the previous videos, the whole thing was black. It's some kind of baked on coating. I think they take these pieces individually and hang them and then dip them in this stuff, and then it's baked on. The problem is the goddamn flies. The coating over time, the ethanol causes the coating to fail on the inside, so it causes all kinds of issues. The paint ends up plugging up. There's screens on the pickup side of both of these pumps, or if the stuff gets past that, eventually, in my case, I have another filter up here that I'm more so using as a regulator. It's a Corvette filter regulator, but in the Volvo applications, the fuel would, or the paint chips and everything would get into everything. It'd get into the fuel pressure regulator, the rail, the injectors. So it just makes a huge mess. This is not the Volvo, the official Volvo pump. This is the Chinese replacement, the whole thing. It's like 170, 80 bucks or something like that for this entire assembly. If you want to buy the Volvo one, you're going to spend way more than that. So I bought the cheapo one. They both have the issue. You buy a replacement Volvo one, it's still going to have the coating. Maybe they use different coatings, but the ethanol compromises either system. So there's a few videos on how to take these things apart. It's especially easy. It's easy regardless, but it's especially easy when the thing is brand new and there's no corrosion, there's no lake water that's been run through it. So there's 3 screws up on the top here, 3 on the bottom, and the whole thing just pops right apart. It's all just O-rings. You got O-rings here, O-rings there. It's very simple. It's very easy to take apart and disassemble. But I got down to the point where I just had these 2 housings. Because if you look around on YouTube, there's a guy on YouTube that does pretty detailed videos on how to disassemble and assemble, and like he fixes these as a service because it's such a common issue. So according to this guy, the problem usually lies in with the 2 cast parts of this assembly, the top piece, and then this is the bottom casting, and not so much these pieces here. Like This is the well I was talking about. There's a tube, like a cylinder inside there that fills up full of fuel. And then there's this outer piece that slides over top of it. And in between the two, there's a water jacket that in the Volvo applications, you have water that, I don't know if it comes in here or goes out there, but then you have another fitting. You can't hardly see it, but right here. So that's how they feed water through. There's a water jacket around there, and they're trying to keep the fuel cool. I'm assuming they had a problem with the fuel getting too hot because you have two pumps instead of just one here. And they're recirculating it right back to they're not going back to the tank. They're coming off of the return and they're going right back to the module, and then it's so I could see where they have issues with fuel temperature. But these two pieces, that piece and the tube on the inside of it, I believe they have the same like coating as the castings, but they don't seem to have a failure issue. The way that the stuff is applied seems to hold up fine. So I didn't do anything with those. But when you get these castings apart and you look on the inside of them, and it is painfully obvious why the coating is going to fail. What we determined is I think they, like I said earlier, they hang these and they dip them. Well, in the inside, there's a bunch of recesses on the inside of this casting that when you dip it, there's going to be air bubbles. So when you take these apart and look at them, you'll see it. There's huge spots that they are completely missed. They didn't even get coated because of the air bubbles when they dunk these things in whatever this coating is. Because I was actually surprised. I started this engine quite a while ago, and I had left the fuel in there. This thing was still full of fuel. The well still had fuel in it, the pumps. And that fuel was nasty by the time I took this thing apart. It was like orange. It was varnish. It was terrible. But it didn't compromise the coating. We were expecting the coating, to already be failing just from leaving the fuel sitting in there, and it didn't. It's a good coating. It's a pretty good coating, actually. And what probably happens is it takes a while. It's over time, especially with those spots inside the casting that they missed with coating. That's going to allow the fuel to work its way up under the edge of the coating and slowly work away at it. And I'm sure that's probably what happens. It doesn't all just happen at once. It happens over time. So I got these two castings off, completely stripped them of everything. On the inside of like this, you'll have there's a float assembly and a few other things you have to take off to get these things down to just aluminum, just metal components. And I went and bought some, your standard aircraft stripper stuff over at the Ace Hardware. And I put some on, I think, this piece and let it sit. I did a test spot and let it sit for 15-20 minutes. I came back and it didn't touch that coating. Did not do a damn thing to that coating. It wiped right back off. So I'm racking my brain trying to figure how I'm going to get this coating off, because like I said, it is actually really tough. So I had come to terms with the fact that I'm going to have to find somebody with a cabinet that has media that can blast this thing, but that has media that is, abrasive enough to take this stuff off, but also not is minimally abrasive as possible, because there's O-rings everywhere on the inside of this thing. And in order to really actually get all of that coating out of there, you're going to inadvertently hit those O-ring surfaces, which if you were careful enough and you had, I worked at a sandblasting company for years, and if you use the right media, you could do it. The right guy with the right media, I think you could get away with it and it would be fine. But I didn't want to do that if I didn't have to. So I kind of run out of ideas, and I went out to the company I used to work for. I wouldn't take it over there, but they went underwater here with the big floods that came through. So They're kind of out of commission. So I knew of this guy that we used to deal with that did powder coating, and he was not far from me. I've never actually been to his shop, but he's only a few miles away. And somebody told me he has his own cabinet. So I figured, no, the guy does powder coating. Maybe he's got some media that's, like walnut shell or something like that. So I took it out there and showed the guy what the hell was going on with these things, and he's like, asked me if I got all the plastic and rubber and everything out of the castings, and I'm like, yeah, they're completely stripped. And he's like, well, let me see it. And he grabs a hold of it, ties a wire to it, and we go in the way back corner in the back of his shop, and he's got this big yellow drum, and he just dunks it in there. I got some pretty good stripper, he says, so I'm not real optimistic. I'm just standing there talking to the guy. And I'm not even kidding. It was 2-3 minutes later, he pulls this one out, and the stuff is just falling off of it. Just like nothing. I was astounded. I'm like, what in the hell what is in this barrel? And it's some kind, he told me it's B17. You'd have to look it up. It's some kind of aircraft stripper that he buys in these smaller, I think 5-gallon buckets. And he just keeps this big drum, full of this stuff. And it is extremely rowdy. I've never seen stripper work like that. I've used a lot of different kinds of strippers. And this stuff was unbelievable. So I'm either going to be bringing a lot of stuff to him from now on, or I'm going to see if I can get some of that stuff. But anyway, it worked fantastic. He washes the things. He didn't even charge me because it didn't even take hardly any time. So completely clean the inside and out of these things. That's the nice thing, is like that coating gets all the way, because they dip these things. So that coating gets in all the galleys and everything that you can't get to. You really would not be able to get to very well sandblasting, where you dunk it in a tank of stripper. That stuff went in there and ate everything out. So it's completely clean inside and out, both castings. And I was gonna repaint them at first, like just the outsides of them. But the more I thought about it, I'm like, what the hell with it? I don't. This boat is never going to sit in the water for any length of time. It's never going to be stored in the water. It's never going to be in salt water. I just don't. A lot of this kind of stuff, I really don't see the reason in really getting carried away with corrosion protection. I don't. I'm going to be draining all of the water out of this engine and everything after, like, every time I use it. So I'm just not. I'm just going to leave them. I think it's probably the best bet. And then, like I said, I'll keep a couple spare pumps in the boat. Not hard to get to change these, either one. But yeah, it's really important. You have to address this if you want to use this pump, which it seems like more and more people are using them, and they're not having problems with them. They seem to work. As long as you address the coating issue, they seem to work pretty well. People use them and they're pretty happy with them. And this thing was used on big block applications, so I don't know what its rating is, but it apparently moves quite a bit of fuel if it's enough to run an 8.1 liter. So, like I said, I can't stress that if you don't do something with it, it may be a long time, but you're going to have a problem probably at the least opportune time. So you got to make absolute damn sure that you do something about this. And I almost didn't. I almost just put it together and said the hell with it, and we'll just get as much time as we can out of it. But so this is back on the alternator here. One of the my dedicated viewers made a good point about this. This is a crappy, like, it's a marine version, but it's a crappy old 10SI. And I used to put these on, everybody does. I think you put them on equipment all the time, old diesel equipment, because they're really simple. You know, the factory Motorola alternator would burn up on some, you know, portable air compressor or generator or something like that. And those things are, you know, $300 to replace, where you just throw those away and slap one of these Delco one wires on there, and there's one cable. I mean, they're self-energizing. They just kick themselves on a certain RPM. But I forgot about this, and I'm glad he reminded me that these don't charge really at idle. They don't really move any amps. They don't push any amps at idle. Like, you get, in this case, like, this boat needs an alternator that charges at idle. So I'm not going to be happy with this alternator, I don't think. But I already had it, and the mounting pattern and everything is the same as a lot of different style alternators. So I'm going to use it for the time being. I can take all of this stuff off and put it onto a different Delco. I had to buy they call this a bidirectional fan, because it's spinning backwards. I have it mounted backwards. So sorry, my phone is doing some weird stuff here. The fan that comes with them is directional. It's like a curved, and I don't know, it's like a spiral type of fan. It only works one way. So when you spin them backwards, you have to either get a reverse flow fan, or you got to get one of these, which is straight blade. It also works. And then there's a 4-rib pulley I found somewhere for like 20-some bucks. So like I said, I'm gonna run it for now, just as a temporary placeholder, because I'm just trying not to spend any more money on this thing right now. But we had to, I took because this groove back here, 4-rib groove, is made to run the factory AC compressor, which would be over here. So this being a lot closer to the engine and smaller, like, there wasn't any way I could make that belt work. So I cut one of those belts and just slung it up on here and vice gripped it or whatever, so I knew how long the belt had to be, and took it in there, and they actually had one that was the right length. I don't know, I think it came out to be like a 30-inch belt or something like that. But yeah, so I'll run with this thing for a little while, and then I'm gonna step up to a different kind of alternator probably. But either way, it's the mount and the whole tensioner setup and everything that I did on it. I think it should work on a lot of different alternators, so I'm not really concerned about it. And it's a nice location. It keeps the alternator out of the spaces over here where I was trying to have storage on the inside of the boat. And there was nothing up here, so it was a perfect place for it. I'm glad I was able to get away with it. Another thing, your pulley, when you go to tighten your pulley, when this thing's spinning backwards, it is going to try and loosen the pulley now. So if you do run one backwards like this, just make sure you put Loctite or something on that, the nut in the shaft coming out, to try and keep the pulley on there. So I redid the water routing again for like the frickin' fourth time or whatever. I had the gauge on the outlet side of coming out of the engine here, which didn't really make any sense. Like, if I want to measure the pressure that the entire engine is subjected to, you would want to read your pressure from before it goes into the engine. So I moved the gauge down to the inlet. This is where your water is going to come in, feed both sides. Comes out, and I used to have these come out and they ducked right hard over to the manifolds, because I didn't realize how much space I was going to have up here. Well, I made them come straight out. It kills two birds with one stone, kind of, because it allows me to put my gauge, the same gauge I had, and this loops around it. But over here, the water hose used to turn and go like right in between, like it was like right up against these fuel lines. Like, this is going to be pretty warm. You don't want to be subjecting the fuel to any more temperature than you have to. So this looping it out and around so it's not anywhere near all that stuff. And then on the sides, once the logs fill up, They come out here, and then I just piped them all the way back underneath here. So these risers, when I got them, they had the fill fitting up here on the side, and then they had just a plug in the bottom. I just switched them because you can fill these risers from whatever port you want. So I put the fitting down here, so it'll just fill from the bottom. And again, because of the storage that I want to have partitions right on either side of the engine block. So that kind of keeps everything real tucked, real close to the engine. So what else? There was only a few other little things I had to do to the engine here. I got the oil sender down here. I don't really like it down there, but I didn't really have much of a choice. This thing has 2 wires on it. I didn't realize one of them's for the gauge, but the other one is actually for a low oil switch. It's built into that. So when I bought my check engine light, I got a little low oil light too. Then I'm going to hook up. So that'll be kind of neat. But you can see up in here, that's where the factory oil sensor is, and that's why you have this passage through here. But that sender is just too big. It's just this big dumbbell sender. Like the thing would have had to been sticking all the way up, way the hell up over top of this, and then you get this big tall standpipe going all the way down. I don't like doing that when it comes to oil stuff. I like to try and minimize fittings and stuff when it comes to oil in general. Like, I don't want to have a big tall pipe and the sender up there vibrating and then eventually having that fail, have it break, work harden and break. So there was just no good way to do it. I could have maybe turned 90 degrees and fed it out this way, but whatever. It's down there. You know, the wires are going to run up through here, so hook. These are the 2 wires, so put them on these 2 terminals. So here's the water sender. I got hooked up now too. That's all wired in. I had like the main power cable, like just the not keyed hot, but like full-time hot. I had 2 terminals right here of my full-time hot wires, which was stupid. I don't know why I brought those to this terminal. There's no reason to bring them to these. This is what needs to go up to the dash, essentially. You know, like you have starter signal. There's your water sender, your tack signal, keyed hot. I think this is OBD, the diagnostics. I can't remember whether, but you get the idea. There's no reason to have your full-time power cables up here. So I cleared these 2 off and pulled those wires out of there, and I'm just going to put the oil sender wires in place of them. But I brought those 3 big power cables down and just attached them to the starter terminal along with that alternator charge cable that goes up there. So, you know, when you bring in your battery cables here, you're just going to connect your battery cable with the starter and connect the ground to the block. You know, you'll get full-time power from down there at the starter instead of up here on this terminal. This fuel module assembly, that well that fills up full of fuel, it has to allow the air out of it in order to let it fill up with fuel, obviously, or it would just airlock. So that's what this hose is. There's a float and a little needle valve in the top of that thing. So this is basically fuel vapor that has to be vented somewhere. So I found 1/4-inch marine fuel hose, and at first I was going to punch a hole in this boot, but then I thought about that, and I'm like, if I do actually end up keeping the mass airflow sensor, and now you're bringing in air behind the mass air, that's going to confuse the PCM doing that. So I decided against that, and I actually did it to the air filter, which was kind of cringy. Like, I took this $75 air filter that I didn't want to buy to begin with, but it was the only one I could find that fit in here properly. But yeah, and then I had to punch a hole in it. It was kind of weird. I just had to do some goofy stuff with brass fittings on the inside and outside, and like red Loctited everything together so it doesn't come apart. So that way it's in front of the mass airflow sensor. It's not going to throw it off. And hopefully I don't get too crazy amount of fuel vapors and stuff like that through here, because obviously that's going to in turn get the mass airflow sensor dirty often. It's going to need cleaned often, but I don't know. I think it's the best way to do it. And like I keep saying, I may not even end up using the mass airflow sensor or the O2 sensors on this thing. This thing might just get speed density tuned with a wideband and just call it done and not even run the math. But yeah, I'll probably wrap this video up. It's basically just about the engine, getting this thing completely ready to rock. There's just all these little knick-knacky things. The main thing was the fuel module up there and getting an alternator mounted on it and everything, but it's a couple stupid little things left to do and the engine will be ready to go on it. I got a whole nother video to talk about the boat itself. The boat is got a paint job on the outside, inside, everything is upholstered. The floor, there's your hood over there, everything is upholstered, all of the panels. And I actually had everything sitting on this thing. I had it sitting outside, and I was actually able to see what the damn boat looked like for the first time. It was, it's beautiful. It looks awesome. It looks like an old 70s boat. It looks like something you can go out and buy in 1978, you know what I mean? Which is exactly the look I was going for. I love how mid-late 70s boats look. I love the bland square windshields, and I just think they're beautiful boats. So I think we knocked it out of the park with how this thing looks. But obviously I can't show it to you right now. I got everything all tore back apart again. But I will do another video probably here shortly, and I'll talk about the boat and the paint job that we did and all that type of stuff. I just kind of wanted to focus more so, actually, most importantly, that fuel module. If there is somebody else out there using that, you really got to get that crap out of the inside of those castings. So yeah, good deal. Again, I tried to make this a short video and epically failed. Thank you guys for watching. There'll probably be another video here shortly within the next few days. So see ya.